Hello and welcome to Political Geekery, a podcast about science, politics and the intersection of the two. I'm Sean.
And I'm Mark.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we did an episode.
Yeah.
Kind of skipped November.
Had a bit of a rough time between the pair of us, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, we're back. It's like our festive special episode, in which we will be doing nothing special or festive.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, have you ever heard of genetically modified mosquitoes?
Are they something that Monsanto have made because they want to destroy the world?
No.
Then no.
It's a British company that's behind it. But no, so mosquitoes are something that spread quite a lot of diseases. For example, malaria kills something in the order of 2.7 million a year. Now that's a figure that might be a little bit on the low side simply because it's difficult to diagnose these sort of things.
Yeah.
That's just one, bear in mind.
Well, I remember seeing during the Ebola outbreak, sort of was like last year and like the beginning of this year, really, wasn't it? That basically malaria during that period would kill more people in a week than Ebola would over the course of a year. It is sort of. I mean, people are sort of vaguely aware of it. I don't think people realise the scale of just how bad it is.
It's not just that it's killing 2.7 million, as I said. It's a problem that's only getting worse. They reckon within the next 20 years or so, it's set to double that number, and that's malaria alone. There are other diseases that mosquitoes carry, like yellow fever, which there is a vaccine for, but it still kills 30,000 a year. Yeah. Then you've got stuff like, and I may butcher this a little bit, dengue fever, and chikungunya. Again, I may have butchered that. Again, these are ones that kill quite a lot of people as well. And something that the US is trying to focus on curing or preventing. There is some good news with it, though. In the last year or so, there's been a new vaccine for malaria. Now, I don't know how effective it will be, because obviously there's going to be plenty of people that still don't get it, and there's also probably quite a few anti-vaxxer problems with it, people that disagree with it for one reason or another.
Yeah, I suppose that's kind of particularly in Africa by the fact that pharmaceutical companies have done some dodgy things in the past, and I think that it becomes quite difficult because to some extent you're almost sort of having to say to people, well, okay, they did this terrible thing and that terrible thing, and they tested these drugs on you without making it clear that it was a test. But this time you can trust them, and I can see how it becomes. I think it's more understandable, is what I'm saying, in those parts of the world. But it is a big problem.
Another encouraging thing, which is the thing I wanted to mainly talk about here, was there's been experiments done with mosquitoes in Brazil, in the Cayman Islands, where they introduced 3.3 million male genetically modified mosquitoes. What this does is it makes their offspring unable to develop and mature, so they effectively die off. Now, when they did this over a 6-month population, the population of mosquitoes dropped by 90-odd%, which is like a huge amount. Sorry, I forgot to mention. The reason why they picked the male mosquitoes is that it's not the males that bite, so that you can't possibly get any problems from it, really. You're not going to get like a version of Spider-Man from it or anything daft like that. And considering the amount of things that this could potentially stop, this is a really interesting way of preventing the disease rather than just vaccinating for it. One of the really interesting things that I found when researching this is that the Rockefeller University have now pinpointed the genes within the mosquitoes that makes the mosquitoes find us in particular. Because mosquitoes haven't always fed on us, haven't used us for their protein source, and so if they can figure out a way of turning that off, they won't even need to bite us. They'll revert back to the other animals that he originally bit. So they haven't always been biting us, in short.
Yeah, I mean, it seems interesting. I mean, the only thing I suppose that I would be a little bit worried with that is that you are sort of. I mean, we don't have a great history when it comes to sort of monkeying with the food chain.
No, but in my personal opinion, if one species needs to die and by us, it's the flipping mosquito. You know, it kills more than any other organism on Earth, and yet it's the one thing that we haven't been able to get rid of despite our best efforts.
I mean, it kind of sounds like sort of introducing it in one small area is probably the approach that you want to go for, because you could get an idea for what the effects are likely to be then.
I think that's why they tried it in the Cayman Islands first, you know, small scale, but it had massive effects, you know, positive effects with the you know, stopping the mosquitoes maturing.
Yeah.
Effectively going on. 90% is huge, but what I find interesting about the Rockefeller University stuff is that you're not trying to eradicate a species, which is what the previous version's doing. Instead, you just try to steer into a different direction now. Wiping out a species has never been a good idea, no matter how insignificant it seems.
Yeah.
So to switch it to a different animal rather than us, it seems like a better alternative if they can do it.
That sounds a lot less risky.
It does.
I mean, I'm not, neither of us is an expert in these things by any means, but yeah, if somebody like sort of put both of those plans in front of me, I'd probably say.
Well, we both understand food chains, and it's not a good idea to mess with that in the slightest. What gets me is, like, are the anti-GMO people going to be squabbling with the anti-vaxxer people?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because
part of me wishes they would.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, because what you I tend to find you don't get that much sort of intra-woo conflict, if you know what I mean. Like, even when
they contradict with one another. Yeah. No, they don't. As long as it's against the evil scientists, you know, because all of them were out for us.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you look at the. I mean, particularly I think with the sort of pseudo-medical, alternative medicine, whatever you want to call it, stuff.
Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's not beat around that bush.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, that kind of area, so you've got things like homeopathy and you've got things like acupuncture, and those rely on completely different models for how disease is supposed to work, because in homeopathy, you've got sort of this whole sort of idea of like cures like, and that you can like improve the body's condition by introducing certain substances. Whereas your acupuncturist, if they were to be consistent, would be saying, well, no, it's it's the flow of chi within your body is blocked, and that's what's making you ill. It can't be both.
I think though, because it's under one blanket banner. I think if people like us who are skeptical of this sort of nonsense keep calling the individual bullshit things for what they are and describe to people what they actually are, then it'll go a long way, rather than just saying alternative medicines are just all bullshit. Which they are. I'm a great believer of what you call an alternative medicine that works.
Medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's, Tim Minchin, I think, wasn't it?
I think Dara Breen did it as well. I don't know who did it first, but they're banging the money with it. Was it Dara Breen? The rest of it became medicine, and what was left became a bowl of
a nice bowl of soup or something like that.
Yeah, a bowl of soup and some potpourri.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
that sums it up.
So that whole bit you did about that is brilliant.
It's well worth a watch on YouTube.
Yeah, I'd say I mean, anybody who hasn't heard that and is listening to this, stop listening to us and go listen to Dara Breen. Yeah. So gender bias in science is a pretty serious and I think pretty pernicious problem. I mean, I think we've talked about this on the show a bit before. I think you did a piece on was it Jocelyn
Bell,
yeah, Jocelyn Bell, and I think we talked a bit about like Rosalind Franklin, about how basically a lot of women who did make huge achievements in the sciences had their achievements sort of really underplayed and never really get their dues during their lifetime.
I think part of the problem is that because we've never been taught about them, we don't know half the names. I mean, I admit I am ignorant of it, but at least try to look for the female scientists out there that have achieved a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, like just then, like I really struggled with Jocelyn Bell. I remember Jocelyn, but anyway. So I kind of wanted to talk about just how serious the problem is, and like what one of the possible causes might be. So, Women in Science and Engineering, WISE, who are a campaign group, stated that as of 2014, only 1 in 7 science, technology, engineering and mathematics professionals, that's STEM subjects, it's usually called, in the UK were women. In general, women seem to be particularly underrepresented in mathematical, engineering and physical sciences, as well as like information technology and computer science, and overrepresented in like medical and biological and social science fields. But overall, it's very much skewed towards men.
The IT one's interesting because I remember reading somewhere that like there used to be more women in computer science, and then the numbers slowly dropped off over the last decade or so.
I've
forgotten one half of it, to be honest. But
I think around the sort of the 1980s. I mean, I tend to think that what's happened there is that computer science became a prestigious thing to be involved in, and lo and behold, it suddenly became something that men should be doing, not women.
It'd be interesting to know what changed there exactly, though, so they can corner it maybe. And, try and get more women back into it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that at Bletchley Park, where Turing worked, and, they cracked the Enigma machine, that a significant proportion, certainly, of the technicians working there were women. I mean, that's partly to do with the conditions at the time. It was during the war, but
there's also a history of women being calculators not in the modern day sense, but women that just did the calculations to science. So there were probably, maybe it was a leftover remnant from that, I'm guessing, but women tended to do the donkey work, which they got called calculators for whatever reason.
Yeah, but so I mean, one of the things is that the gender gap seems to become wider the further up the career ladder you go. So, for instance, the degree of underrepresentation in lecturing posts is not as sort of bad as it is for professorships, which are sort of at the top of your academic food chain. So in 2012, 43% of lecturers and senior lecturers in academic medicine were women, but only 16% of professors in academic medicine were women. I mean, and this is in medicine, which in general is a field where women are actually quite well represented. I mean, it gets much worse when you look at the physical sciences. So in 2009, there were 650 physics professors in the UK. How many of those do you reckon were women?
Right. About 150, I'd guess.
36.
Right. Way off.
Yeah, around 6%, basically.
Right.
So, so I mean, you can sort of see that this is a big problem. Wise have called this the leaky pipeline. So not only are women actually less likely to choose STEM subjects going through education, but those who do are less likely to go on to work in the field they study. They're less likely to progress as far as men working in the same field are.
Yeah. You'd think with, I mean, they're having difficulty getting people taking physics degrees and stuff like that. You'd think with that shortfall, they'd probably try and push harder for more women and more people in general to join it,
Yeah, I mean, I think that
to get into it at least.
Yeah, I mean, you do have sort of campaign groups that are sort of doing stuff around this, and a lot of institutions are trying different ways to sort of improve things a bit. And I think like WISE have sort of a goal of trying to get the proportion of women in STEM up to 30%. Which is still low, given that women are around 50% of the human race. But
are they thinking of like that's the tipping point, and then like obviously there'll be more inspirational women out there to inspire the next generation, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just an intermediate goal. It's kind of, this is possibly something they've gone, this seems achievable.
Yeah.
In the foreseeable future, if you like. I mean, because this is like sort of a very very sort of institutional, sort of third sector body, So with the exception of some fields, and even at the top tiers of those few exceptions, women are just hugely underrepresented in the sciences at a professional level. I mean, I suppose you've got to wonder why that might be. So this was a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, aka PNAS. One of us had to laugh. It's actually a very well-respected journal with a hilarious acronym. But yes, it's a 2012 study by I apologise as ever if I mispronounce the name here. Corinne Moss-Rakusen et al. This was titled "Science Faculty's Subtle Gender Biases Favour Male Students." So the participants in the study were 127 US academics from a variety of institutions around the country, both public and private universities, as you have in America. And they were presented with materials that were purportedly from an undergrad who was considering a career in academia and was applying for a laboratory manager post and was basically seeking feedback. They were told that this was a real student and that the student would see the feedback that they were given. And the student was at random either male or female, or implied to be. Basically, they were randomly either named John or Jennifer.
Mm.
And participants were asked to rate from the materials they'd been given. They were asked to rate the student on competence, hireability, their own willingness to provide additional mentoring, and also what starting salary they would offer to that student for a laboratory manager post.
Right.
They were also tested for subtle gender bias using a test called the Modern Sexism Scale. What the study found was that the perceived gender of the student, via the name, was a factor in all four of the main outcomes. Female students basically were perceived as less competent, less hiring, less deserving of additional mentoring or a higher starting salary. So all these effects were found to be statistically significant quite strongly.
Yeah.
On average, the female students were offered a starting salary of around $26,500 US. The male students were offered an average starting salary of around $30,000 US.
Right.
So it's a pretty big gap.
Has there been similar studies in this country? You mentioned dollars as well.
This was a study done in the US. I wasn't
wondering if we're any worse or better as well.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any studies doing the same thing in the UK. I would say there is a similar gap in America to here. Obviously not exactly the same, but I think it gives you an indication maybe of where part of the problem's coming from. One interesting thing is that the gender of the participants, of the academic, was actually not significantly associated with any of the outcomes. So female academics seem to have been just as biased against female students as male academics were.
Oh, that's what?
Which is very surprising.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that.
And it kind of, it's one of these things that does, because a lot of the time you see this thing of people sort of saying, if we get more women into the top posts, that will reduce the level of sexism down the line.
Do you think maybe speculation here, but do you think maybe it's because they had a rough time getting to the top, then therefore other female students need to have a rough time getting to the top? Do you think that's probably playing in the back of their mind somewhere?
I don't know if it's necessarily anything that explicit. It's difficult, because you're speculating, aren't you? But
I realise.
If I was going to sort of really speculate, I'd say that maybe when you have sort of institutional sexism, and it's very difficult for women to get ahead within an institution, I think a lot of the time the women who are going to sort of do better will tend to be the ones who are okay with it, or the ones who maybe sort of go, okay, well, I'll just sort of see myself as one of the boys or whatever.
Yeah.
And again, this is sort of speculation on my part, and I don't want to speak too much to something which I don't really know too much about.
Yeah, but, I understand.
One thing that I mentioned that they did this test for subtle gender bias, and that was a factor. They found that very much influenced the degree to which a participant favoured the male students, or rather the degree to which they disfavoured the female students, more accurately. So, basically what comes out of the study is that female students were perceived to be less competent, and that this sort of then has a knock-on effect of them being seen as less hireable, as less of a valuable asset.
It probably knocks your confidence as well, so that probably doesn't help in that respect.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's difficult. It must be difficult to sort of perform well in an environment where people sort of systematically, maybe not even without realising it themselves, it's hard to say. 'Cause, unconscious bias, I think, does play a role in this stuff.
Yeah.
But where people are sort of systematically undermining you, really, and sort of treating you less favourably than your peers, it's got to have a knock-on effect.
Yeah.
On your sort of your confidence and on your ability to do well. This isn't the whole of the problem. There are other factors at play here. One thing that I saw in a document by Wise was that if you do a survey and ask parents what profession they would most like their son or their daughter to go into, that you will see like a huge number of parents want their sons to be engineers, but very few parents want their daughters to be engineers. Or rather would pick that as kind of, what I would like my child to be doing. I mean, I think that's got to have a big effect as well, because from a very early age we are sort of, not explicitly necessarily, I mean partly explicitly, but there's this sort of thing of constantly being reinforced about, you are a boy, you should be doing this, you are a girl, you should be doing that.
I think though, I mean, one of my friends and I were talking about this one, like, we know people that haven't given their kids toy guns, for example, a male child, not like didn't want them to have guns, and I completely understand that. But what this person found is that like they ended up turning the toilet roll into a gun and going around shooting. And like, it's my understanding that they're picking this up through TV and stuff.
Yeah,
that's it. It's reinforced through TV and things that they're watching. It's typically the male shooting the gun, some bad guy or whatever, and he picked that up. It doesn't matter if you buy the toy or not. It's the toys. What I'm saying isn't the only thing to blame when it comes to.
Oh, absolutely.
That.
I mean, it's not just parents that are to blame here, and I'm not saying that at all.
Or the manufacturers of toys.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a whole culture, I think, that sort of reinforces these things, and that's a very difficult thing to do anything about, really. I mean, I do think sometimes all we can really do is just try and chip away at it as much as we can.
Okay, so wanted to talk about food banks in this country. A problem that David Cameron always talks about and said he'd definitely fix. Now, thanks to people getting sanctioned for the slightest of reasons these days, people are having to rely more and more on food banks. And, the fact that a large amount of food banks, you're only allowed to go to them, 3 times in 1 year. Considering a sanction can be anywhere between 4 to 13 weeks, isn't going to quite cut it,
I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know whether this changed, but I know that at one point, wasn't it possible to be sanctioned for like a year for...
I have heard of more extreme ones, but
yeah,
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. It depends on what it is you've supposedly done, I guess. But 13 weeks with 3 boxes of food, they're not considering whether these people have got families to feed and whatever. Which is another point that I wanted to get onto. You get the government telling people that they should eat 5 pieces of fruit per day, and then they sanction people with families. It's a joke.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen like what you actually get from a food bank. It is really not very much.
No, it's a small box of food with what people think is a balanced sort of diet. It's not to sort of scrape by with.
It's bare essentials stuff. I mean,
yeah.
You could live on it for like a little while, but it's not. I mean, and you wouldn't want to live on that stuff all the time. I think you would run the risk of becoming like deficient in some stuff, quite possibly.
Well, yeah.
You've got no sort of fresh fruit or veg in there, or.
I bought little bits of food for the food banks before, and I have tried to like pick bits of fruit which I know is quite green. It's going to take a while to ripen. For that particular reason, like. Anytime I've gone to buy, I've been thinking about it from my point of view. It's just like I'm quite a fussy eater, so
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like tinned fruit and veg. I mean, it's not ideal, but you're going to get some.
Well, that's the kind of thing I went for. Also, toiletries, buying stuff like that.
Yeah,
the clearly essentials, and I mean, I didn't think about it straight away, but once I did, I was like, of course. Another point is that more than 1 million people used food banks in the last year in the UK. It seems to be continually growing as a problem. In fact, in 2010 there were something like 45 food banks up and down the country. Care to have a guess where it's at now?
Don't know, 200.
It's about 440 odd.
Oh, fucking hell.
Yeah. And companies like National Trust do actually want to like keep making more of them. It's not their fault, and I can understand why they want to, but it is kind of depressing that we've got this sort of American idea. The first food bank formed was in the US. We've adopted this idea, and it keeps growing and growing because there's an ever greater need for them. Yeah,
well, it's something that slots very well into sort of like a kind of a neoliberal model of really, isn't it? Because it's basically, it's not provision by the state. It's it's charity, and that's something that you sort of the libertarian right really loves. I mean, as long as it's somebody else doing the actual charity, basically, 'cause it doesn't cost rich people much of anything. But
like looking at it a bit negatively, don't get me wrong, it's a good thing, it's a brilliant thing. But looking at it from a different point of view, it's kind of helping them get away with a lot more. If these food banks weren't about, there would be a lot more people stealing from shops. They need to get the managers of these shops actually complaining to the government that you're clearly being too harsh.
Yeah.
The government would end up with a lot more pressure on them, and as I say, that's me being extremely negative about them. But
well, there was an interesting thing. I mean, I think this was a couple of years ago. I don't really remember a lot of the details, to be honest. But I remember seeing it was a story in the Express, and the Express was absolutely furious, as it tends to be. But in this case, because some local police department was, when it was sort of like taking petty shoplifters to the station rather than charging them, a lot of the time they were referring them to a food bank for emergency assistance. When people were say being nicked for robbing a tin of beans or something, they were like, oh well, I didn't have any money.
I didn't think they could nick people for that sort of thing anymore. I thought. I think they give you a caution and a bit of a slap on the wrist, but I don't think you could do any kind of jail time for stealing food.
I mean, it does happen. There was,
really?
There's been people who've been given short but still custodial sentences for fairly petty theft. I think a lot of the time it tends to be repeat offenders. Which the thing is though, that if your skin's you're very
if you
likely
need food, you're going to keep doing that.
Yeah, you're not going to sort of go, oh well, I've already been caught shoplifting once, so I'll just not eat this week.
I'll just starve rather than being naughty.
Yeah, I mean, it's bullshit basically. But I mean, that was an interesting thing, because it was kind of I think that plays into what you were saying there, that to some extent these kind of charitable organisations, I mean, as horrible as it would be if they weren't there for the people who really need them, in some ways they do serve that function. They do sort of, to some extent, they reduce the impact of a lot of these problems. I mean, in some ways it's no bad thing, but
I mean, I watched it a couple of things on the subject when I was researching this, and there'd be people that are getting these small boxes of food and just saying stuff like, "Thank you, you've saved my life." I was thinking about topping myself because I couldn't feed my own children now. When it's at that level, you just it's just so depressing.
Oh, it's fucked up. The whole thing is just it's that thing. If you're sanctioned, even if it's a short sanction of a week or 2 weeks. If you're on the bones of your ass, that's a long time to go without any income. And especially if you've got kids.
The point of benefits is that it is a lifeline. It's not supposed to be, do the slightest thing wrong and we'll just leave you completely destitute. It's a horrible system that they've turned it into.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been sort of brought in bit by bit over decades, really. I mean, it's not a completely new thing.
But as I say,
it's definitely intensified.
We've gone from 54 food banks to getting on to 500.
Yeah,
it's a hell of an increase over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, well, and the thing is as well, it's not even just food. I mean, and I don't want to go into too much detail on this, but I mean, it's sort of something quite recently. Somebody I know basically was going around saying to people, look, a school friend of one of my kids basically has no clothes besides his uniform. You know what I mean? She was going around asking people, can you help us out with getting him some new clothes, because he wears his school uniform during the holidays because he's got nothing else to wear. I mean, this is the fucking point that we're getting to here.
Yeah, I mean, another good thing by the food banks I learnt was that they're actually giving out heat vouchers for people with families as well. So you can actually turn on the heating during the winter months. You know, so again, it's another good thing, but it's something that shouldn't be there. As far as I'm concerned, the politicians shouldn't be getting a pay rise until they don't exist.
Yeah, it shouldn't need to exist. Yeah.
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 Not in a country that's wealthy as wealthy as ours. It's
Well, that's the thing, you know. I mean, I think it's true globally to an extent. That you know we do, you know, we throw away enough food to basically feed every hungry person in the world, like very nearly twice over.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact numbers, but I believe I posted something about it on our Facebook page a while back. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of like calories of food being wasted.
It's the logistics, though, isn't it? I'm not excusing it. It's bad, but it's getting that food to not rot while you're travelling to one part of the planet or another.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it to an extent. But then you look at it, the parts of the world where, you know, where hunger is at its absolute worst. And it's terrible here, you know, and it's terrible when it happens anywhere. But yeah, the places where you've got like your kids dying every day. I mean, they're not the countries that are importing the majority of their food. You know, a lot of these places are, you know, agrarian economies, and that, you know, not to take away from, you know, sort of the real sort of poverty that some people face in this country, but that to me is just the most disgusting thing, that in countries where the entire economy is based around crops and around growing, that you can have kids starving to death, you know, while food's being exported all around the world. That's fucked.
Yeah. There's also other issues of going a bit off topic here, but like where like they're growing diesel rather than growing food, and that's a huge issue these days as well.
Yeah, you get the cash crops thing, don't
Yeah.
you? But yeah, I mean, like, it's the kind of thing that you have going on in this country is that, I mean, 'cause it's not like there isn't enough food in this country to feed everybody. You know what I mean? You know, there's like the amount of stuff that gets chucked in bins behind supermarkets every day, while people with families have got nothing. That's ridiculous.
Some supermarkets do actually give some to charities, in all fairness, so if they get what you want.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, there is a lot of that going on though.
Yeah, I mean, you also get instances of like supermarket managers chucking bleach in the bins and things like that.
That's
Which
that's just prick. Like.
Yeah, it's basically attempted fucking murder. But yeah, I think a lot of supermarkets kind of have hit on this thing of, if I'm going to be my usual sort of cynical prick self, you know, there was a lot of, I think, you know, over the last few years there's been a lot of negative PR around food waste.
Yeah.
And yeah, possibly I think a lot of companies have realised that, well, but if they donate this stuff to charity, they're not really losing anything, and they look a lot better for it.
Well, supermarkets tend to overstock simply because if you have like one item of food left on a shelf, people are less likely to pick it up. There's something psychology going on there. You know, if you see a piece, you're like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, kind of nobody wants the last one on the shelf.
Exactly,
yeah.
And so they overstock on purpose, and that doesn't help because they end up chucking a good deal of it away. It's the way our brains work, I guess.
Here's the thing, you know, Walker's crisps.
I do.
Yeah, well, you know how with Walker's crisps the salt and vinegar flavour comes in green packs and the cheese and onion comes in blue packs.
Yeah.
And you know how it used to be the other way around.
Yes.
You're
going to tell me it didn't now, aren't you?
Yeah, it never did. A lot of people remember that changing, but that change never happened. Walkers have never used blue for salt and vinegar, and they've never used green for cheese and onion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently I got a few false memories.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I mean, I actually came across this a few months back. I was listening to a story about the Mandela effect on Skeptics with a K, which is a podcast Merseyside Skeptic Society put out. It's another thing that's much better than us.
Oh, yeah.
Which you should also be listening to if you're not already and you're listening to us. But the Mandela effect is mostly a sort of online phenomenon where people insist that they remember past events differently to everybody else. So it takes its name from this thing that a lot of people who make these claims say that they remember that Nelson Mandela died in prison in like the late 80s or the early 90s.
Doesn't this get into like weird conspiracy theory?
Yeah, like
type
some of them
business?
believe that they're originally from a parallel universe.
I think,
and all
I've
kinds
heard
of,
that somewhere.
Yeah, probably on that other podcast. But yeah,
probably.
But so anyway, in the comments to this, somebody mentioned the Walker's Crisps thing. I was pretty surprised, like, 'cause he sort of said, "Oh, I'm surprised you didn't mention about how all these daft people think that Walker's Crisps packs used to be a different colour." And I nearly responded to it with, "Well, they did. It used to be a different colour."
Yeah,
I
that's
just about saved myself from making a dick of myself on the internet again, and like decided to look it up. But so yeah, I googled around a bit, and one of the first things I found was like an old sort of FAQ that used to be on the Walker's website specifically said, "No, we didn't change the colour of our crisps. Please stop asking us," essentially. And
So-
I was pretty and then like any normal person, I started going through crisp adverts from the 1970s on YouTube frame by frame, so I could check what colour the packs were.
How did this one start? How did that false memory get into one of us? Because I could have sworn it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I see. Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, because I posted about it on Facebook as well, and a lot of people were like, "Are you sure about that?" And then I kind of set off this mind virus of people like looking through ads and googling desperately for like old crisp packets to try and prove that this change had happened.
Don't think I'm not going to go home and do that. By the way.
Yeah, that's it. There's a weird kind of cognitive dissonance that comes with it, isn't there? That it's like, no, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, one sort of speculative explanation I've heard is that all the other, I mean, like I don't know, like I think we have one or two overseas listeners who probably don't even know what Walker's Crisps are. They're Lay's in America.
Yeah, there were Lay's in Europe as well, I think.
Yeah,
Definitely in Greece.
mainland Europe, I think they're Lay's
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that all the other sort of major companies use that other colour scheme. Like they will use blue for salt and vinegar and green for cheese and onion. And Walker's Crisps weren't really a major brand until I think like around mid 80s to early 90s. They really started to take off as a big brand. They had the whole sort of feeling. Gary Lineker was
just
like a
about
big
to say
deal,
that, yeah.
and they got him as a as a spokesperson. I mean that's been going since before we were born. Incidentally, that particular thing, which I didn't
Really?
even realise. But yeah, so. And I think what kind of happened was that at some point this was new, and it's created this sort of cultural meme. Oh, well, this colour is new, this is different, and it's somehow become confused in sort of popular culture.
It's sad when you like have a false memory and you realise it's wrong, but your false memory was better. That's the one that annoys me the most.
Yeah,
Like song lyrics, which I have in my mind, and like I think, yeah, I like it that way, and then you actually hear it, and it's like, oh, that's not as good.
Yeah, well, this is the thing as well, like that. It's not like just that I have like a vague feeling that it was different. I was like absolutely.
Yeah,
no, that's the way the world is. That's it. It felt like this was just a true fact.
Yeah. If you'd asked me, I would have flat out said,
Yeah.
it changed.
And and a lot of people. I mean, I did like a little straw poll on Facebook, on sort of friends and friends of friends, and I was about a third of the people who answered remembered this change happening. And interestingly, it seems to sort of correlate with how old they are. That basically people who remember a change remember it happening when they were a kid. Like it doesn't matter whether somebody was born in the 70s or the 90s; they're just as likely to remember it. But
Yeah.
people who were born in the early 90s were saying, "Oh yeah, I remember that because it happened when I was about like 7 or 8, which would have been like in the late 90s when I was a teenager." I was like, no, it definitely
if you'd
changed
have
earlier
asked
than
me
that.
though, I'm 30. I would have said early 90s.
Yeah, I'd have said I was about 6 or 7, something like that. You know, that I was, it was like early 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, like some people had like these elaborate memories. Like, no, because I remember the ad campaign when it changed. Like, and they had Gary Lineker, and he got the wrong pack of crisps, and he was really confused.
That I don't remember.
Yeah, that never happened. But
No.
yeah, this person who I'm not getting at by saying this, by the way, but they had this like clear memory of they saw this advert as a child, which is bound up with this thing that just never happened.
So it's weird though, isn't it? Because like the false memory is building another false memory to make sense of it almost.
Yeah, that's it. We always seems like we have a false belief, and then we sort of build this whole structure around it of other things to make it make sense.
There's been experiments done where they've shown adults
Yeah.
pictures of them when they were kids, and it's been photoshopped. And they will start constructing a false memory completely around it, won't they?
Yeah, it's Elizabeth Loftus who did that research.
It's really quite cool.
Yeah.
And scary.
Well, that's it. I mean, 'cause, like, some people I spoke to about this became quite distressed by, it's not really a big significant thing, really, is it? The colour of crisp packets. But it boggles your head a little bit.
It shows you how fragile your mind is, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of sort of suggests something which you don't really necessarily want to believe about your own memory, that it's flawed and that maybe things that you remember just aren't true.
What gets me is that people, as you said with the Nelson Mandela thing, would rather believe that it's part of another universe or something rather than just going, no, the equipment on my brain isn't quite as good as I thought it was.
Yeah. Elizabeth Loftus's research, which you mentioned there, is quite interesting.
Well, you mentioned her. I didn't actually know her name.
Yeah, you mentioned the research.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, like one earlier study she did was the Lost in the Mall study. Published a paper about this in Psychiatric Annals in 1995. It was Elizabeth Loftus and Jacqueline Pickerel, and basically what they did was they had 24 participants aged 18 to 53. And they gave them a booklet which had 3 true stories about their childhood from around about the age of 5 that they gathered from their families, and 1 completely fictional story about them getting lost in a shopping centre at the age of 5. And what they did was, they had them sort of read these stories and then write out in the booklet any additional details that they remembered. And then in a couple of weeks they did an interview with them and sort of said, oh yeah, you know this story, can you tell me anything more about it? And they repeated that again. And out of the 24 subjects, just from being given the story and being asked about it a few times, 7 of them, when they first got the booklet, reported that they remembered getting lost in the shopping centre in this specific story that never happened, and added further details to it. I think that went down to 5 of the 24 once it went to the interview stage a couple of weeks later. So I mean, like I say, not only did they remember the events, they gave additional details. Because every one of the stories had a thing about a kindly sort of elderly woman sort of coming across them and helping them find their parents, and you get participants sort of talking about what this woman was wearing, or where they'd been earlier in the day and things like that, embroidering these whole extra details onto this thing that just didn't happen.
It makes me think, where are these extra bits coming from? Is it genuine bits of memory which have been bolted onto it, or is it generally being fabricated to fit the picture, if you see what I'm saying? Is part of it memory, maybe? Yeah,
I mean, I do wonder whether that could be because you sort of, maybe your brain sort of goes, okay, so shopping centre when I was 5, or I used to go to this shop, and and you kind of go, you kind of, because your brain tries to make it fit. I mean, bear in mind, this was still only 7 out of the 24 that said, oh yeah, I remember that. The others all said, I don't remember that. But even so, that's, for just as I say, at this point, the booklet stage, just reading the story in a booklet, that about a quarter of the people involved went, oh yeah, that happened.
Yeah.
That's peculiar.
Wonder if that scales up, though. If you had a huge study, will it still end up being a quarter of the population?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about...
Or group, should I say.
Yeah, and I only sort of Googled around a bit, and I found a couple of studies of this kind, mostly, to be honest, using a fairly small number of participants, so it's hard to draw any big-scale conclusions. But it's interesting. I mean, the Photoshop pictures of childhood is another one in the same sort of series of experiments. I mean, in that one in particular, it's interesting. I can't remember what you said. But what the actual thing was that they photoshopped a picture of them as a child in a hot air balloon.
I didn't say that, but
yeah. So I mean, and they were sort of saying, "Oh, do you remember when you went up in a hot air balloon?" That's a memorable thing. That's
Yeah, you shouldn't forget that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember ever going up in a hot air balloon. I'm pretty sure if I had, I'd remember doing it. So it's kind of, it's a big thing, especially if you're a child. That's an amazing thing for a kid. I'm in a fucking hot air balloon. This is brilliant. That you could just show somebody a picture and go, do you remember when you did that? That's...
I suppose when you're really young, though, everything's new and sort of fascinating.
Yeah. So I suppose to sort of close things out, there's another thing I came across while I was looking into this, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Anomalistic Psychology Research Unit at Goldsmiths College in London. they look into these sort of strange little quirks of the human brain and stuff like, what's going on in somebody's brain when they think that they're having a psychic event and things like that. They collaborated on an art project with an artist, A.R. Hopwood, where they gathered false memories from people and made like sort of an art installation out of them. So they got stories from, basically asked members of the public, what things do you have memories of that you actually know didn't happen? And there's still a website up, falsememoryarchive.com, which has like a selection of some of these. And I was reading through it, and they sort of range from the really mundane to the funny to the just disturbing. And I thought it'd be an interesting thing to finish on.
Yeah.
So the first one was in 1965, while away at college, I received a very upsetting phone call from a friend informing me of her mother's death overseas. Now, when I remember it, I'm standing on the sidewalk in front of the dorm, talking on a cell phone. No matter that I know that part is false, when I call up the memory, I see myself standing there holding a cell phone to my ear in 1965. It is one. I remember so clearly visiting the chimpanzee enclosure at Chester Zoo as a child. I'd heard about this particularly naughty chimp who used to throw stones at the glass, and when we saw him he was 30 foot tall and filled the whole indoor enclosure. I was dreadfully disappointed when we returned a few years later. And finally, I always think I have a little sister that I love so much, and I can feel her presence. And that's all we've got time for.
I've been Mark.
I've been Sean. Thanks for listening. Ta-ra.
Bye for now.
Political Geekery is an independent production. For more information about the show, visit our website, politicalgeekery.wordpress.com. You can contact us via email on politicalgeekery@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter @polgeekery or find us on Facebook. If you've enjoyed the show, please share it.